What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly sports history for November 29th, 2022. Survived playing golf yesterday. It was actually pretty decent. Didn't hack it up too bad. It was very, very wet and muddy, I guess, from the rain from on Sunday. But as in typical fashion, it's the first time I've actually played like a full round in a while. Usually I've been playing a lot of scrambles, which I guess gives me a false sense of confidence because I've been able to rely on other people's shots. But I actually played like I parred the first hole, played like crap the rest of the front nine, shot a 59, was able to finally figure something out with my swing though, tweaked a couple things, and shot a 48 on the back, which I mean, when I'm playing well and playing consistent, that's typically what I do. I'll have five, six good holes, five, six terrible blow up holes. So that's what I did yesterday. So it was good to be out. A good day at golf will beat, or a bad day at golf, I should say, will beat a good day at work any day. So I'll take it, but it feels good going into the golf off season, playing the way I did. So definitely will give me something to look forward to. And my goal next year is to play more golf and just more consistently, try to get Thatcher to come out with me and hopefully get him to love the game and just have somebody to go out and golf with. But Sixers update before we get into this day. They beat the Hawks 104-101. JoJo came back. It was a little sluggish at first, but I think he put together a nice run there in the second half, came up clutch in the fourth quarter, and that's a good sign moving forward. Also, James Harden should be back within the next few games, according to what I read. Originally, he was supposed to be out a month, and I think that was about 5.5 weeks ago. So it's taken him a little bit longer, but I think from what I read, he was progressing well and should be back soon, which would be a huge boost for the team. They're currently in the sixth playoff spot, which keeps them outside of the play-in. But there's a lot of season left, and it should be a huge boost. Hopefully, Doc, and this is a big if and big hope, but hopefully he continues to use that rotation. Guys like Shake Milton, who played phenomenally with JoJo, Tyrese, and all these guys out. Hopefully he kind of relies on them a lot in the regular season. I know things get different in the playoffs, but, I mean, you got to just get to the playoffs first. So hopefully he's able to use that rotation, which sometimes is his Achilles heel. So I'm anxious to see what he does with that and if he's able to continue to do that. So I'm looking at you, Doc. Like I said, you caught a pass here with the Eagles and the Phillies and everything, but all eyes are on you and how you're going to handle this now that everybody's starting to come back. Flyers play tonight, looking to avoid their 10th straight loss. And it's a rough patch of the schedule. However, I've as far as, and I'm going to have a future, and I think it might be this week's episode. I got to plan out sort of what's going, but they're tanking basically, and they should be tanking. And I am a proponent of tanking, and anybody who's a fan of a team should be a proponent of it because in certain cases, in certain sports, it's the only way you're going to get better. And look at the Sixers. Yes, they haven't won a championship yet. However, where they were 7, 8, 9 years ago, they were unwatchable. So at least now they're must-see TV. They're getting national exposure and everything like that. So we'll get more into it. I really think that's going to be this week's Back to the Future episode. Just got to figure out how I'm going to tweak it. So stay tuned for that. I'll keep you posted tomorrow on this day in Philly sports history, what I'm going to do with that. Speaking of that, make sure you guys are following both podcasts, Back to the Future and This Day in Philly Sports History. Subscribe. That way it goes right to your inbox. Check us out on the YouTube channel. I'm still toying around with some ideas on how to do some live things. There's a lot of moving pieces that I have in my head that going into the new year, I'm hopefully going to be able to implement. So just stay tuned for that and make sure you're subscribing to everything. That way you're up to date with what's going on. All right, so speaking of the Flyers, today we're going back to 1998 to November 29th, 1998. The Flyers beat the Vancouver Canucks 6-2 at the FU Center, or First Union for those of you, but it's still to this day, I think it's Wells Fargo now, and I still call it the FU Center. So anyway, John LeClair became the 10th player in Flyers history to score 3 goals in a period in the third. And in that game, he helped the Flyers turn a 2-1 deficit into a 4-goal victory. So going into that third period, they were down 2-1. LeClair scores 3 goals. Flyers win, go on to win 6-2. All told, he had 4 goals that game because he had one in the first. Eric Lindros added 5 assists. So they were just like a monster line that day. And this was the year after they had made their oh no, I guess they were still 2 years removed from their Stanley Cup run. But that year they ended up clinching the 5th seed, which was their lowest seed since they had been back for a few years there in the playoffs. Lost in the first round to the Maple Leafs 4-2. However, during this time period, this is when the Flyers kind of were one of the top teams. If I thinking back in the Eastern Conference at the time, there was the Flyers, there was the Devils, the Lightning were in there, Buffalo Sabres. It was good hockey to watch, especially when the playoffs came around. And they continued as being one of those top 4 or 5 teams until 2006, 2007. But during that time span, they had 2 Game 7 losses in the Eastern Conference Finals, including the 99-2000 one, which I remember very, very well. And that's where they blew the 3-1 lead to the Devils, where Lindros came back and got knocked out by Scott Stevens and basically ended his career. But the problem always with those teams, and I mentioned this before a few weeks back when we talked about Pelle Lindbergh, was just the revolving door that was their goaltender situation. You had Van Beesbrook, Brian Boucher, Roman Cechmanek, who probably had the most longevity of any of them. Robert Esch was in there. It just was a hot mess, and I feel like you were going up against Dominik Hasek and Martin Brodeurs and all of those guys, and I think that's ultimately what stopped them from winning a Stanley Cup during this time. But this day in Philly sports history, November 29th, 1998, John LeClair scores 4 goals, becoming the 10th player in Flyers history to score 3 goals in 1 period. Eric Lindros added 5 assists as the Flyers beat the Vancouver Canucks 6-2. Big story today, though, is it's the United States versus Iran. For basically, I think if it's a draw, Iran advances. If the United States wins, they advance. But if you've been following this, there's a lot of controversy about the U.S. men's national team supporting the protests of the treatment of women and things, basically the theocracy in Iran. And I don't want to turn this into a political thing, so I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. But this has a very big Rocky IV shit type feel. Like, this is bigger than just soccer right now, which is definitely very, very similar to Rocky IV with Drago and the Cold War and everything. But more importantly, the game. If the United States wins, they advance to the knockout stage, which I believe will start Saturday. I think it's Saturday. But I think they win. I don't know why, and maybe I'm kind of being too patriotic. Maybe I'm being a homer, whatever you want to call it. Maybe I'm thinking Rocky in Rocky IV, where he turns the crowd and we can learn from everybody or whatever. I forget his exact quote. If I can change, and you can change, we all can change. So I think the pick, I'm betting this. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Last time I bet a lot of money on the United States. They burned me, so hopefully they're going to win me that money back. But USA money line, I also like the over 1.5 goals. I'm going to bet both of them. I have a couple parlays going or whatever. So let's go US. Let's beat the Iranians and move on to the knockout stage. This day in Philly sports history, John LeClair scored his 4 goals and the Flyers beat the Canucks. Sixers are looking good. My golf game was halfway decent yesterday, so it's a good Tuesday. Have yourselves one, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.